Hello, my name is Nadia Denton. I'm a film curator based in London. On behalf of CineDB Insights, I'm pleased to introduce this interview, which is part of the CineDB Africa Conversation Series, a collection of in-depth encounters with film professionals from across the African continent. CineDB Africa has been kindly supported by the Goethe Institute and now has a new home on the e-portal of the Durban Film Art Institute. Today, I will be in conversation with Tendeka Matatu, Director of the African Film Division at Netflix. It's splendid to have you with us today, Tendeka. Welcome.
Hey, Nadia, lovely to be here, and thank you very much for inviting me.
So, drawing from your experience, obviously, as an executive, quite senior executive at Netflix, and your, numerous years as an African film producer, how would you say that filmmakers should be prepared for the way that financing models are changing?
So there's two different answers, really. But let me start from a kind of more holistic point of view. I think that filmmakers and producers should always be open to finding the best thing, the best model that works for that particular story, right? Yeah, and it's about the audiences that they want to get their story to, and how do they best reach that audience, right? And how does their financing help them reach that audience? For example, at Netflix, we always say many roads to yes. On the film side, we get involved in different ways. Of course, we commission films entirely. That's whereby we buy and own the IP, and we finance films literally from script to screen. But we also look at co-production models where we co-finance, and the film producers bring their own finance, whatever percentage that is, and we finance against certain rights, against certain territories for a certain term. Or we look at pre-licensing or licensing finished films. So I think there's a myriad of different models, and I think it's really got to do with what is the intention of the producer, what is the intention of the filmmaker, right? If I was looked at my past as an independent filmmaker, I would say, hey, I'm going to make this art house movie. How am I going to finance that? Well, I'm not going to finance it with a whole lot of equity, right? I'm going to try and get as much soft funding as possible, because I know that film's life is really on festivals and possibly small releases. So I think it really comes down to the filmmakers asking themselves the question, who's the film for, what is best for the film project, and what is best for, their own ambitions.
Amazing. And where do you think filmmakers should be looking in terms of sources of getting a sort of quite basic understanding about film finance?
Yeah, I mean, it's about talking to your peers, right? Yeah, and working and looking for mentors, and working with other producers and co-producing projects, and really understanding the best way to kind of learn is to actually do it, right? Yeah, and to kind of to figure that out. And I think that there's no kind of one course will give you the A to Z of film financing and make you an expert in a given time. I think that with each project that you do, you learn mistakes, you learn better ways of doing things, you learn efficiencies. To be coming back to your original question, is that I think that financing has simplified, right? Yeah, nowadays, right? Yeah, I do think that 5-10 years ago, film financing could be insanely complex, right? And there could be a myriad of partners who all had different mandates that you had to kind of balance and juggle and pull together. And I think that there's, with the likes of Netflix for sure, but even some of the other streamers out there, there is a simplification in the financing that's really helpful towards filmmakers.
Thank you for that clarification. Post-pandemic, and in the context of global change, what would you say are the monetary ranges that filmmakers should have in mind in terms of low budget, mid-budget, and high budget productions intended for African and international audiences? So essentially, would you say that the ranges that films are now being made for, or that should be in the mind of filmmakers, has shifted in the last couple of years?
Again, I think it comes to who's your film for, first and foremost, right? Yeah, and having a real understanding, an in-depth understanding of the market, right? As head of film for Africa, I'm here to work with African filmmakers, African talent, and bring great stories to African audiences, right? Yeah. So if I'm going to finance a South African film, for example, right? Yeah, and to commission it for Netflix, it needs to play for that South African audience first and foremost, right? Yeah, that's the kind of quantifiable thing, right? Yeah, and then if it breaks out and plays everywhere else, that's a gift, right? Yeah, so I think that there is a real understanding of the size of the market, right? That filmmakers need to have, and their audience, and really think about things audience from an audience perspective, and then finance accordingly.
And are there any genres that you think tend to perform better, or not even think, but that the stats have maybe shown tend to play better on Netflix Africa than others?
I don't think it's just on Netflix. I think if you look at South African audiences or Nigerian audiences, and look at what people are watching, it's pretty evident what's working and what's not. You can. Our slate has to be broad, right? Yeah, I think that it can be any type of show, and you can check in on the Netflix top 10, global top 10, or lockdown per country. And you can just see the types of films that are working really well, right? Yeah, I think across the board, both in Nigeria and South Africa and Kenya, it's safe to say that action works really well, rom-coms work really well, comedies work really well. Mystery and crime thrillers, those are the kind of things that work really well. I often get people coming to me, and we see it quite a lot, that people bring horror titles, and I don't know why. I think people like horror. Maybe personally producers like horror, but horror is one thing that just actually doesn't play that well for our audiences. Nor does it play very well in the cinemas in South Africa or Nigeria. So it's one of those strange things. I think it was Gordy, the guy who started Motown, right? Yeah. Before he started Motown, he had a shop that sold records, and he only sold jazz, right? Because he loved jazz, and he was like, no, I'm going to sell jazz, and people kept coming and asking, hey man, do you have any blues? And he's like, no, blues, who cares about blues? It's all the same, and songs are about like my baby left me and all of that, and he's like, you got to listen to jazz, right? Yeah. And within like a year, that business went bust, right? And I think that was his first lesson. I mean, Motown went on to become the hits factory, right? Yeah. But his first lesson was, if they want blues, sell them blues. Don't try and sell them jazz, right? Yeah. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. And I think filmmakers sometimes forget that. It's like, give the audience what they want, right? Yeah. Don't try and sell them something just because you like it, right?
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Even though someone like me who does social impact and audience engagement would also say that there's space to introduce audiences to new genres and concepts and ways of enjoying cinema, but that's a whole separate conversation.
No, and you're absolutely right. And I mean, I think that there's a place for those kind of films to coexist, right? I think there's a place for art house film and commercial to coexist, right? Yeah. But when you're going to be as a producer, right? Yeah, and you're going to go and finance those films, you've got to be realistic about what the size of the audience is, the budget that you can make them for, or how you put together your finance plan.
Yeah, I won't argue with you on that. And I wondered if you could share with us future Netflix plans or developments that would be relevant to some of the Africa-based or African filmmakers who are watching this.
Sure. Well, we've got lots of plans. There's always things that are happening. We're always looking for great stories that we can share with our audiences. I can't say too much in terms of like the detail of it, but from we're growing our slate, right? Yeah, I've been at Netflix for just over a year and a half. My mandate was really to build a strategy and to build a film slate for sub-Saharan Africa. We know that sub-Saharan Africa is not just one big country, and so we're looking at our key markets within that, South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, and I'm spending a lot of time talking to filmmakers, putting things into development. We've got a really healthy development slate building, and yeah, just great films. I mean, I think, you know, the big picture, making Netflix the home of African film, you know, and that's got to be true for audiences both on the continent and all around the world, but it's also got to be true for filmmakers, right? I think it's really important that, you know, the great filmmakers, the great storytellers that we have on our content come and make their great films with us at Netflix.
Yes, very true. And reflecting on the ways in which obviously filmmakers can make pitches and engage with industry professionals such as yourselves, clearly we turn to some of the major international film markets. Just reflecting on, you know, how your experiences were when you were one of the indies on ground, and obviously now as a Netflix executive, can you share some tips about how filmmakers can best prepare for when they are attending some of these big markets, whether it be Durban Film Mart or Cannes or, you know, the EFM, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you know, it's first and foremost, be prepared to network, right? Yeah, and really be prepared to go out there and talk about your projects, and know about your projects, know about them well. Secondly, do your homework, right? Yeah, do your research, know who's going to be at the film festival or the markets. Know who those people are that you want to target, and know things about them, right? Yeah, so a lot of research, I think, is important. And yeah, have a plan. You can have meetings and you can have set up meetings, but there's always that kind of one meeting that happens at, you know, 12 o'clock at night, or like, you know, you bump into somebody in a hotel lobby or something like that. So I think knowing your own slate inside out and knowing how to pitch those titles on your slate really quickly, really well, really effectively, that's worth practicing.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And it certainly helps to make the process feel less daunting. But on the business of networking, and I really want to drill down because it is difficult, you know, for your average indie to be at a market. All right, they recognize you, they say, oh my gosh, there's Tendeka, I need to speak to him. What tips would you actually give on actually networking, so when it comes to having to approach people in the industry and to talk to them and to not stumble over one's words, and, you know, to feel that sense of you know, awkwardness about actually talking about one's projects?
Yeah, I think maybe remember that these execs are, you know, not big scary, you know, people, but they're just you know, filmmakers and human beings just like everybody else, right? Yeah, so I think it's like relax on that sense. But I think it's you know, as Team Africa, we maybe operate slightly differently to our colleagues in the US, right? And our industry is at a different place as well. You know, so that we don't rely on gatekeepers, right? We don't rely on agents and reps. And, you know, our doors, both myself, my colleague Dorothy Gatuba, you know, our colleagues in licensing, our doors are open, right? Yeah, and you know, we're always ready to have a chat with producers, a general chat first and foremost. I would say don't just, you know, email me and send me 20 scripts all in one go. Have a chat with me first, you know, build that relationship, find out what we're looking for, and then we can you know, definitely share some information on, you know, how to submit material and things like that. But I think you know, we're not impossible to reach.
That's really encouraging. And very lastly, what do you think is the biggest creative stroke commercial selling point from the African continent right now?
The big selling point is authenticity, right? Yeah, and I think that you know, we've seen it around the world, and Africa is no different from Southeast Asia or from Latin America or from you know, our colleagues in India or France or Germany for that matter. You know, if you make content that is specific and true to the place that you come from and reflects the audiences that you want to speak to, and feels authentic, right? Yeah, and works for that local audience, right? Yeah, then it will travel, right? Yeah, and it can be anything. It can be a romantic comedy. It can be, you know, a historical drama. And we've seen it. We've seen it with some great titles, right? You've seen it with Young, Famous, and African, which is a non-fiction title. We've seen it with Anikolapo, which is Kunle Afolai's film, or Blood Sisters, which is a series from Moabudu's Ebony stable that Kenneth Ngayang and the late B. Bandele directed. From a business perspective, obviously, Africa is a potentially large market with a lot of growth, right? And that's why you see our competitors, scrambling to get into the streaming business on the continent. And we're fortunate that we saw the opportunity earlier, and we've got first mover advantage. But ultimately, it's about our audiences, and we've got to keep making the shows that our audiences want to watch, and keep exciting them, and keep making that must-watch content. Right?
Lovely. Well, that's a perfect note to end on. Thank you so much, Tendeka, for the time that you've spent with us today. I'm very much wishing those filmmakers who are watching this to be bold in taking up that invitation you so generously put out for them to approach you and have a chat with you, and just talk through some of their ideas before thinking about maybe a more formal submission. But yeah, it's going to be interesting and exciting to see how Netflix is able to take the African film industry as a whole forward over the next couple of months and years.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll be seeing people in Durban at the Durban Film Festival.
Indeed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nadia.